issue of process and good governance, it's important for the Minister to indicate to the House to which committee this legislation is to be sent.
Right. Okay, I did. Thanks. I did start.
Thank you. The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
I call the honourable member David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today we see the government trying to do a patch-up job on an intelligence network and intelligence agencies that have some very serious shortfalls. And I would put it to you, sir, that it is too important simply to apply a band-aid to save face for the Prime Minister. Now, this is about our national security. It's about our human rights. It's about Kiwis' confidence in the integrity of our intelligence agencies, and agencies that we need, but we need them to function according to the security demands that we have on us, but according to protection of our privacy and human rights. And that's why we have been calling from the very beginning of the debacle around the intelligence agencies for a wide, independent inquiry right across our entire intelligence network, not just about the internal workings of GCSB, because it is, sir, the right thing to do. We need to do this properly, we need to do it once, and we need to get it right, because we can't go on as we are. And I want, sir, for the House to reflect just exactly why we are debating this issue today. We're debating this issue because we have had a train wreck of the last few months around our intelligence agencies that has severely undermined the confidence that the public has in those agencies. On January 20th last year, the police with the FBI raided the home of .com after the GCSB had been spying on him for more than a month. The very next month, in February 2012, questions were raised with the GCSB and by other agencies about the lawfulness of that surveillance, because Kim.com was a New Zealand resident. It concluded, strangely enough, that their actions were lawful. In May, the directors of the GCSB, the SIS and the Inspector General all knew there were legal issues with them spying on New Zealanders, not just in Kim.com's case. In July, they told John Key about the possibility that New Zealanders were being spied on unlawfully, and he did nothing. The next month, the GCSB director goes to see Bill English and asks him to sign a ministerial certificate suppressing the details of the agency's involvement on spying on Kim.com. Suppressing the details, keeping out of any public scrutiny the fact that they had screwed up. John Key claims he wasn't told about any of the purported illegal spy until September the 17th, when he was told that the GCSB had acted unlawfully. He didn't admit at that point that the broader concerns about illegal spying on New Zealanders had been raised with him, in fact, 2 months earlier, and he had done nothing in order to suppress that possibility of that spying being illegal. Now we have this, and I haven't even mentioned the fact that in the course of this, in the midst of all this, John Key shoulder taps a friend of his to become the head of GCSB. All of that, sir, contributes to an overwhelming lack of confidence in our intelligence agencies by the public at large. And now, in the heat of all of that political fallout over this debacle, what the government is trying to do is to rush through legislation to make sense, or make these activities in hindsight legal into the future. And that's not what is needed. What we need is a full and independent inquiry. An inquiry that obtains a terms of reference right across the Parliament, and it can be agreed upon. And I believe that is entirely possible. An inquiry of the ilk that has been done in Australia. In Australia, they conducted an inquiry in 2003, an independent inquiry that looked at all of their intelligence agencies, and again did it just 2 years later. They are not afraid of being able to look at their intelligence agencies in total. We should not be afraid of doing that either. This fully independent inquiry, sir, will look right across the agencies, look at all of their functions and all of their accountabilities. Now, I certainly accept that some of the findings that could come from that inquiry may well be similar to the conclusions that appear in this legislation. Completely accept that. But we know it will be part of a much broader analysis. And we need this because in addition to the debacle that we've seen over the last few months around GCSB, we know that the SIS wants to expand their legislation. They've got legislation that wants to expand their role. We haven't seen that yet, but we know that legislation is written and has been put to one side at the moment, to be introduced at some later date, no doubt. We know that there's been no independent inquiry, sir, since the 1970s in this country. There have been massive changes in technology, and I completely agree with the Prime Minister, who says that there are threats to our cyber security. Absolutely, I completely accept that. But we need to be going about this in a way that makes sure that we have the best possible setup and structure to enable those threats to be dealt with the correct ability to provide oversight. So one of the things that some of this legislation deals with is the Security Intelligence Committee, the parliamentary oversight of these intelligence agencies. So I can tell you that the ability of that parliamentary committee to provide oversight is woeful. It is woeful. And I want to give you two examples, because we're not permitted to speak about what we discuss in these meetings. But I can tell you that the last meeting that we had to look at some of the legislation that was coming forward, the briefing that we got was well below the level that the gallery, the press gallery, received a few hours later the following morning, together with an 8-page briefing statement that we didn't get a chance to have a look at. Now, why are we going to have a committee? Why do we have a committee that is given less briefing than the parliamentary gallery will be able to receive about something as important as this legislation? Second example, when the legislation was announced at a press conference by the Prime Minister earlier this week, I got a copy of the legislation 2 minutes before that press conference. I'm a member of that committee. I got it 2 minutes before. So if this committee is going to be treated with that sort of approach, sir, I think that this legislation does not go anywhere far enough in terms of being able to satisfy public opinion that scrutiny is adequate and able to give them the confidence that these agencies are operating effectively. Then there is the question of urgency around this legislation, sir. We need to rush this through because why? Because we're led to believe that there are somehow threats around New Zealand. Again, I believe the Prime Minister is playing politics. If it was so urgent, sir, why would we not rush it through last year? This is now May. Either the government is not taking those threats seriously, which it says it is, or there is actually no real problem and therefore we wouldn't need to rush it through today. In fact, we could have had an independent inquiry that had the buy-in of the entire Parliament, sir, last year. We could have had the buy-in of the entire Parliament. We could have had a terms of reference that was agreed to by the Parliament, and we could have had that inquiry reporting back to Parliament in a way that gave New Zealand real confidence. So, sir, we oppose the legislation because it's a band-aid. It's an ad hoc approach. It's way too mired in politics, and it's an attempt to get the government out of a hole. It's not durable, it's not lasting, and it's not going to go as far as it needs to go in terms of satisfying the public that they can have real confidence in our intelligence agencies. We need to balance our national security, both our physical and economic security, with our right to privacy and civil liberties. And if the government was to establish such an inquiry that would enable us to satisfy both those competing objectives, we would cooperate with that, we would work with them, and we would work to make to bring forward to this Parliament legislation that would be able to give the public the confidence that our agencies are not only up to date, but have the scrutiny and the correct accountability that we need. Thank you, sir.
I understand that the Minister wishes to correct a statement to the House.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Thank you. So it's a personal explanation or a point of order?
I think it's probably